Switzerland, best known for Toblerone, their mountain ranges, cheese, and something really boring, that Switzerland is the most neutral country in the world, with an added bonus of having high living standards. However, we don't care about that. We care about how and why Switzerland is so neutral and how they managed to maintain their neutrality despite being surrounded on the east and west during World War One. Then that ended, and then in World War II surrounded on all sides. But first, we need to go back to the year 1515 when the Swiss lost in the Battle of Margarino after losing around 10,000 men in the battle, which was between the French and Venice against the Swiss. Being surrounded by your enemies that you invaded or fought against is typically a horrible idea, especially after a massive battle. So the Swiss announced something along the lines of, "Hey guys, we're going to stay neutral for all conflicts so we avoid all the negative side effects of being in the war," and announced the same thing once again in 1648 during the Treaty of Westphalia, and they ended the 30 Years' War. However, these announcements were ignored by the wider international community until everything changed in 1815 at the Treaty of Paris, when Napoleon was abdicated for a second time, and then finally participants of the Treaty of Paris, being Great Britain, Austria, France, Sweden, and Russia and Portugal, all collectively agreed and recognized Switzerland as a permanent neutral nation in all conflicts and in most world events. World War I presented the first major challenge towards Switzerland's neutrality due to the tension caused by World War I between the country's German-speaking population against the French-speaking population of Switzerland. World War I broke out, and then shortly after, a mass mobilization of the Swiss military, drafting upwards of 200,000 men. After the first week, the 200,000 men that the Swiss drafted were stationed in the following places. The 1st Army Corps and the 4th Army Division were stationed between the regions of Basel and La Chaux-de-Fonds, with the 2nd Army situated just behind the 1st and 4th Armies in the area of the cities Solothurn, Bern and Mürten, with strict instructions to protect the neutrality of Switzerland, obtaining military information of troop movements along the border, and to support policing over the border regions. In the southern border, there were initially no defenses securing the border on Italy. However, when Italy declared war in 1915, there was a minor shuffling of troops, moving them to the south border, with around half of the active forces within Switzerland stationed within the country, not on the border itself. Throughout the course of the war, it became more likely that there was not going to be an invasion of Switzerland, so the amount of drafted men in the military slowly decreased. World War I ended, and so the war to end all wars ended, meaning that everyone demilitarized and everyone joined Switzerland in neutrality, right? The interwar period, called the interwar due to this period being in between both world wars. During this time period, the Austrian state of Vorarlberg voted in a referendum, with around 75% of those eligible to vote voting to join the Swiss. However, this was stopped by the government of Austria, the protests of the Entente, as well as the Swiss population, and in 1920 the Swiss entered the League of Nations, which was basically a thing that predated the United Nations and was a thing that succeeded another thing like the League of Nations, but was only European countries, called the Concert of Europe. In 1934, a year after Hitler became the Chancellor of Germany, Switzerland introduced the Swiss Banking Act, allowing the addition of anonymous bank numbers, mostly to allow people to store their assets in Swiss banks, to allow those who were at threat due to the Nazi regime to secure the assets from being seized by the Nazi party. A threat to Swiss neutrality against Nazi Germany was when a Swiss Jew by the name of David Frankfurter assassinated Wilhelm Gustloff, the leader of the Swiss Nazi party, in 1936. The Nazis asked for the assassin's extradition to Nazi Germany, however the Swiss declined, and David Frankfurter was sentenced to 18 years in jail, however was released at VE Day, which was when the Allies beat the Nazi Germany in Europe. As the decade continued, the Swiss had to think logically and carefully on how they would proceed against the Nazi threat, and to an extent the Italian threat on the south border, as one wrong move could start a war. The government secured budgeting for the military, restructured the military itself, allowing better organization and better equipment, as well as increased training quality and length. A year before World War II started, in 1938, the Swiss formally withdrew from the League of Nations. With the outbreak of World War II in 1939 due to the German invasion of Poland, Switzerland immediately started mobilization, drafting around 450,000 men in the span of 3 days. Switzerland was under threat from Nazi Germany due to the Nazis' belief that all Germanic peoples should be unified within one country, resulting in the drafting of Operation Tannenbaum by Nazi Germany, consisting of the planned invasion of Switzerland. Despite this, Switzerland was never invaded by Nazi Germany or the Axis due to the country's geography and the country's neutral stance. Switzerland made numerous defenses along the border, putting the mountainous terrain of Switzerland to their advantage and camouflaging cannons and numerous other defensive fortifications, showing that the Axis that if they invade Switzerland, they will lose a lot of men and tons of supplies. The Swiss were extremely strict about their airspace violations as well, giving authorization to shoot down Axis and Allied planes. The Swiss continued to trade with the Axis in order to dissuade invasions and due to a lot of German gold being stored in Swiss banks and trading with the Allies as well, drowning the Swiss with loads of money. Despite both sides attempting to persuade Switzerland to not trade for the other side, the Swiss franc became one of the only tradable currencies during the World War. A quote-unquote benefit of Swiss neutrality for both sides, which is that Switzerland acted as a protecting power between the Axis and Allies. Protecting power is basically a country that represents other countries if ties are broken. Towards the end of World War II, the number of mobilized men slowly declined, and with the threat of the German invasion of Switzerland becoming lesser and lesser. After World War II, Switzerland experienced an economic boom and was strictly neutral during the Cold War. Switzerland maintained this strict neutrality until 2022 on the Russian invasion of Ukraine, where Switzerland economically chose to go against Russia by freezing Russian assets and closing Swiss airspace to Russian-owned airlines. However, from the words of a member of the Swiss Federal Council, Ignacio Cassis, quoted, "Today's move does not affect Switzerland's untouchable neutrality. Playing into the hands of an aggressor is not neutral."